Hello, good evening, good afternoon, good morning, wherever you are, and welcome to the latest edition of Free Thought Hour. We had some hiccups right up until the last minute. I thought that I was not going to be in the company of my delightful co-host, Tercia, but she's made it. Say hello, Tercia.
Hello, everybody. I made it, and we have power. Yes, so I'm here, glad to be. I left my ill elderly parents in the
Oh,
care of my daughter and my wonderful husband to make the show. So I'm here. Nice to
well
be
done.
here.
I'm sorry to hear that your parents are not well, so let's wish them a quick recovery. Would you like
Thank
to
you.
meet our guest?
I can't wait.
Here he is, Tom Livy. How the devil are you, Tom?
Hello. The devil's got the hold on me.
Hello, Tom. Oh, and you have the beard to go with it.
Is that a cue for a song? Devil's got the hold on me.
Oh, I'm sure it's in some lyric.
Yeah, somewhere there, isn't it? Yeah.
Probably a blues song.
So I promoted you around the internet, and I got a response from one of your fans
Woohoo!
who, and in the detail, the comments, the discussion
Yeah.
underneath the Facebook post, he said he loves Tom Levy. I don't know if it's a he really, but I mean this person, this commenter said he loves Tom Levy. So you've got at least one fan.
That's good news.
Tom, is it Levi or Levi? Just help us out here.
Well, it's Leeds, but I go by Levi, which is my family's name. My grandfather was Levi.
Mm.
So
As in the genes.
yes, but not
Mm.
unrelated. When they came to the country, they changed it to something they thought sounded more American, but actually it's more English.
Okay, right, yeah.
But yeah,
But you'd like to be related to the Levi Jean family, wouldn't you? We all would. They must be wealthy.
yes.
Mm. So we start these shows, Tom, as you know, by asking our guest to give us some idea of their background, the journey that they might have been on in order to get to be the person they are today. I know in your case, you haven't got your early life was rather unremarkable, like mine, in that I wasn't inducted into any religion. I mean, I had the rudimentary christening, the water on the forehead. I wasn't aware of that, of course, because I only just born. And I chose my family very carefully. They weren't religious, so I didn't get taken to church. Although later on in my life, when I was about 8, they discovered that I could hold a tune, and I got sent to join the choir. And anyway, this isn't about me. This is about you. Tell us about your upbringing.
Well, mine is somewhat comical to me because was sent to church as a kid. My family wasn't religious. My
Hmm.
father's side family was Jewish. My mother's was Christian. So I got both sides. We had Christmas and Hanukkah,
Oh
so
yeah,
it was just kind of a thing. I
yeah,
got
yeah.
sent to church, and I think our priest knew I was an atheist before I even knew what an atheist was. I got kicked out of Sunday school at the age of 10 for being argumentative
That's a
over
badge of honor, being kicked out of Sunday school.
over
I would,
the Noah's
I,
Ark. They were telling me all
I,
these animals were on a boat. I'm like, I've been to a zoo, and they're not going to fit on a boat.
I would want some token to celebrate that, some sort of trophy.
But I we practiced Christian and Hanukkah holidays.
Mm.
So I was never really indoctrinated. It was just religion was there. And it wasn't
Mm.
until I was 17 that I came to find out that my family actually believed God was real. I had a job where I was working with a guy who was a young Earth creationist, and he was telling me how the devil planted dinosaur bones, and the Earth was only 5,000 years old. And I came home and said, "This guy, he thinks all these crazy things, and he thinks God is real." And they were like, "Of course, God is real." I was like, "What?" It's like, is Santa Claus also real? Because I'd given up on
Yeah,
God, but I gave up on Santa Claus. So,
yeah.
but I've always been an atheist, despite, and I say my family, they failed to indoctrinate me.
Mm. I see.
You're
Yeah.
lucky. You're very lucky. I was thoroughly indoctrinated, and I was a very strong believer until my 40s. It took me 40 years to see the light. That's the best part of it.
So
But
I
Tom,
must say I like.
Huh?
I must say I like the beard, blue beard. It's very.
well, I've been coloring my daughter's hair for a couple of years, and about a year and a half ago, when I was coloring her hair, my hands were all full of color, and I just added like, oh, it looks pretty. So we were matching for a while, and that's become kind of a thing. Is of course she's got darker hair, so her color is different than mine, but
Yeah.
we kind of
so,
follow
so
suit.
do people ask you? Do people ask you if you're Satan?
If I'm Satan, now, Aaron Raw, he also colors his beard, and he's got a much more satanic look to him.
Yes.
So he's the nicest guy in the world.
Yes, he cultivates a satanic sort of look.
Oh yeah.
That's his image.
So
Yes.
Tom, whereabouts are you based in the United States? I have no idea.
Well, currently I'm in Chicago, the Chicago area. So I've lived all
Okay.
along the East Coast and Midwest. So
Well, talking about Aaron Ra, I can say that I have had the honor of interviewing him in person when he came on a paleontological expedition to the Karoo area just before the pandemic struck in
Mm.
February of 2020. So there's actually a video where I had on the very small rural town called Prince Albert,
uh-huh.
where I interviewed Aaron Ra. So I have that claim to fame or infamy. I'm not quite sure.
I've actually known him for several years. We've hung out. So yeah, he's a great guy.
Well, when you see him, send him my best regards.
I've got lots of pictures with him, and I've actually interviewed him also. I saw him last, I guess in the fall. He was speaking at. I used to go to a lot of conferences, so I wouldn't say in tight, but I knew most of the big names in the atheist movement. Aaron and Matt Dillahunty and Seth Andrews and Richard Carrier and just
So you've met the horsemen of the new apocalypse?
well, yeah, I forget what they used to go by, but it was something like that.
So Tom, you have an interesting story about you raising kids on your own as a man.
Well,
you can do that?
No, my story is when I got married, my wife she's Mexican, so she was Catholic, but she wasn't Catholic. She just Catholic by family. It wasn't until we had a child that need for religion kind of snuck in. And as my daughter got bigger, her mother got more and more religious, and I supported it, because I think it's very important that kids experience religion, but experience all religions. So we would have, I don't want to say fights, but I would read my daughter the Bible, and her mother would get mad at me. I'm like, it's the Bible. It's like, yeah, but don't read her that part. And I'd read her like books of Hindu and Judaism and all these other religions, and her mother would get mad at me. But her mother had a couple of personal tragedies, and she kind of lost it, and she found God. And I supported her for a while, and I was taking her to church. But eventually, apparently, God told her that she needed to leave me, so she left. But so we split time with our daughter, and our daughter, which I've posted some videos. When she was little, I included her in some of my YouTube videos, and as a little kid, she believed, and as she got older, her mother just really kind of piled on the religion, but she didn't really include her in the religion. She just like, you got to go to church, kind of like I was done. So I've given my daughter a vast exposure to religion, and her mother's just kind of focused her on Catholicism. So my daughter, I don't want to say she's an atheist, but she, I told her, you can believe what you want. When you're 18, then you can decide.
Tom,
Yes.
can I ask, would your daughter mind, sorry, John, if I asked how old she is, would you be able to, or do you feel free to share that information?
No, she's 14 now. Her mother left when she was 8. So and I bought her mother a house a mile away. So our daughter has equal access to the two of us. So she goes back and forth very freely to spend equal time with the two of us. And whereas I expose her to art and culture and science and everything, her mother exposes her to church.
So, John, I want to ask you. John and I have as co-host and host, we have a very organic relationship. We hardly ever discuss beforehand what we're going to talk about on a show, because both of us like to wing it. Both of us are teachers. John is a couple of years my senior, but so John, we have not discussed this program beforehand, but the theme of raising children in without religion is actually something that's very dear to my heart. And I do know, and I've met John's children. Well, his younger two daughters. I haven't met his sons, but I've met my daughters who are still minors, and they're lovely kids. And to me, raising my children in a non-religious family was quite a challenge in a country like South Africa, where they are bombarded with religious indoctrination in
Same here.
school.
Same here. Well, not in school,
It's,
but it's everywhere.
well, exactly. Same here, school and wherever you go. And it caused quite a bit of conflict in my relationship with my kids, because as you have only the one child, Tom?
Yes.
You know what
Very
I
wise.
always wise, John will say that, and what John will be able to corroborate this. What I always find amazing, I have 3 kids, and same father, same mother, and you've got these 3 kids, and they are so different that you can't believe they share the same genes. Never mind. And I found it very challenging to raise my children in a very religious country, to raise them as a non-religious parent. And hello, James. I haven't seen you in a while. Welcome. Um, I'm still a friendly atheist, I have to say. I remember fondly, James says he remembers fondly when he was still a friendly atheist. I'm always friendly. I'm a friendly person. But you know, what's so amazing with my daughter, who's now 22, we had lots of conflict about religion because she's a conformist by nature. And I'm a nonconformist. And my boys, so I have a daughter and 2 sons. The middle son is completely non-committal about everything. But he was the one who said, when he was about 10, I asked him, so what is your opinion about all this God stuff? And he said, Mom, if there's a God and if he wants me to believe in him, why doesn't he just come down to earth and say, hello, I'm God, believe in me? And I found that very logical. My younger son, whom John has met, he's 16, and he's quite an outspoken atheist. He's actually told girls who wanted to go out with him and who invited him to church that, sorry, I don't go to church, I'm an atheist. So I always find it very interesting to connect with other parents who have children. And so so your wife takes your daughter to church and you expose her to all the religions. How would you parent as an atheist? Or
Well,
how do you parent as an atheist?
like I said, religion is all around, and there's many examples of people who were not raised with religion, and when they got older, they met somebody or something happened, and all of a sudden, they were introduced to religion and they were sucked in. I mean, Kirk Cameron is a perfect example of someone who, he says he used to be an atheist, but he was never an atheist. He just never thought about it. And then when his career kind of tanked, he found religion, and all of a sudden, now he's like uber religious, and that's his new career. But he got sucked in by this idea. So I wanted to make sure, and part of my YouTube channel was, I think it's very important to introduce kids to religion, to show them what religion is and what religion does to suck people in, because it's insidious in some ways. I mean, it's religion is a cult. It's getting people to believe something that is blatantly untrue, and following rules that are just made up by people to, and it's indoctrination. So you can be indoctrinated at any point in life. So I think it's very important that kids are exposed to religion and understand what religion does and how it works. And with my daughter, just, where we live right now, it's a ever increasing Muslim population.
Yeah.
And I've seen Catholics, Mexicans, Catholics switching to Islam because they've lost faith in Catholicism, but they still need that religion, so they swap to, Islam. I know Catholics who have swapped to Christian. I have a friend of mine, she's Polish, so her family's very Catholic. But at some point, she decided she wanted to be Christian, and she was terrified to tell anyone.
You mean Protestant or evangelist or something? Because Catholics are Christians.
I know. That's why I said, like, what do you like? What do you worry? But Catholics and Christians, it's not the same thing. It's
no.
It's
I suppose
Mormon
the Catholic,
and,
the Catholics, they're the top dogs, and the other Christians aren't real. Is that it?
Yeah, basically. So when her mother eventually found out, she was like, why do you do this to me? This is her mother is complaining to her. Why would you do this to me? Like switch religion. I'm like, religion is crazy. I mean, religion just does crazy things. So I'm constantly giving my daughter examples of how religion is crazy, because I want her to understand. I want her to know what religion does to people, how it convinces people nonsense is real. I mean, I'm very fortunate in that her mother was so over consumed by religion, because her mother said, "You're going to turn her into an atheist." I'm like, nope, you're doing that all by yourself. You're showing her that religion is nuts because you just literally have lost your mind. But
Tom, I want to ask you, if your daughter were to experience a major conversion at 18 or 21 or whenever, what would your response be to that? Let's say she came to you at 18 and said, "Dad, I've met God, I've spoken in tongues, and I'm a Christian now." What would your response be?
We've had this discussion. I've already admitted it would be extremely hard for me not to be sarcastic. That's I call myself the friendly neighborhood atheist, but I tend to be rather sarcastic when people are just overwhelmingly, God is real, God is real. Like, okay, if you say so. If she were to all of a sudden find God and have a major conversion, I guess I'd be disappointed, because she's a smart girl and she's been exposed to what religion can do to people. So I'm not sure how I'd be so shocked. I'd be like, but smart kids get sucked into other cults. So I mean, it's not like it's an impossibility.
When I get asked that question, I always say, and I appreciate your honesty. I'd be disappointed if my kids were to come to me and say, "I'm now a devout Catholic or devout whatever it may be." But I still believe that if they've followed the process of skepticism and they thought it through, one can come to a wrong conclusion.
Yeah, I mean it's easy. Religion paints a very pretty picture. It's most people get consumed by religion because they feel like something's missing or something happened, and it fills the need in them.
It is a very persuasive. No, it's more of it sucks you in sort of thing, isn't it? It's a narrative which people want to hear. It's sort of preaching to the choir, because we all want to have comforting answers to mysteries. We all want to not die, and this is the sort of stuff that religion provides or promises to provide.
You bring up death. That's another thing. When my daughter was very young, we've always had pets, and when the pets died, and I asked her, what do you think happens to her? Because her mother's like, oh, it's going to heaven and blah 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 blah. And I asked her very honest. I said, what do you think happens? And we've continued that conversation since. And I've always been very clear that I will go back to what I was before I was born. There was why would there be a heaven when you die? Then there must have been something before, because everyone always asks the question, what do you think happens to you when you die? Like, I disintegrate. I go back to the elements. I go back, everything that makes up me. It's like what happens to a computer that's full of knowledge, and you unplug it, and it falls apart. It's all that knowledge is there, and it just goes away. So everything that is me will simply go away. The only thing that will remain are the peoples whose lives I've touched.
And you're right to liken it to the condition that you were in before you were born, because that was a nothingness too. So, and it wasn't hell or anything, was it? Nobody suffered by not previous to being born. So if you go back to that condition, it's not frightening at all, is it?
Yeah. I mean, to me, that the idea of death, there's nothing frightening at all. And my daughter understands there's nothing. I mean, we have pet snakes and pet rodents. And the snakes have a much longer lifespan than the rodents, and so when the rodents die, they get passed on to the next pet. I
see.
So and I tell her it's the cycle of life.
Recycling within your personal menagerie. Yes.
I mean, we had hamsters, and we had them for several years. So I mean, they died of old age. And when they died, I told her we can either bury them, or we can keep them via the snake.
Feed them to the pet python. Yes, absolutely.
And she chose the snake. And in a way, the essence, the material that the hamsters were still exists in the snake.
Yes. That's a good way of doing it.
So she has a very healthy attitude towards sex, or toward death. She's still
but it's basically the same thing, isn't it?
So the only trouble with that is you're going to need a succession of ever bigger pets to consider the previous dead ones.
The foundation of philosophy has been set. So the snakes.
It reminds me.
Rats get pretty big.
It reminds me of the little old lady who swallowed a fly. I don't know why she swallowed a fly.
And she died.
I'm working on my son's laptop, and it has this typically male habit of just shutting down at the most unexpected times. So I'm sorry I disappeared right there. We were talking, I don't know what I missed out on, John. Do I need to be filled in? I think with snakes and rodents.
You'll have to watch the recast.
Which I shall.
We're not going to tell you.
I can deal with that. But I was going to say that if any of my kids had to convert, I would just want to be sure that they followed due process. And if it's sincere, then one thing I might be disappointed, I might have my opinion on it, but one thing I can assure them is the chance of me disowning them or loving them less is very, very slim. And that's a major difference between an atheist parent whose child converts to any religion and a religious parent whose child deconverts to atheism.
Do you get shunned, Tom? Does your wife's family shun you?
Oh, actually, quite the opposite. They don't shun her because she's family, but they are religious in the most general sense, like most people are. Like they go to church and they're religious. Where my wife just went over. She's just she's got a whole shrine in her bedroom, and she just goes to church like 5-6 times a week. She lives church, so her family thinks she's kind of as wacky as I do. Her family's still they still like me. They'll have a family party, and I will get an invite. Like her, my ex goes because she's family, but I get invited because they actually want me to be there.
Do you ever feel like you're a project, or your daughter is a project for the family?
Oh, not at all. I mean, it's kind of with my family a little bit. Here's the funny story about my daughter. Her mother's super duper Catholic, but she sent her to catechism school or whatever, first communion school. But her mother's Mexican and speaks primarily Spanish. She never taught my daughter Spanish. And when she sent her to Catholic school, she sent her to a Spanish-speaking Catholic school. So my daughter went, but she had no idea what was going on. Her mother's she's very focused on, she's got to have religion, but she just does it.
He's frozen.
Yeah.
Has he frozen at your end too?
No, he was, but he's moving again now. So
I'm not sure whether.
Not on my end.
I'm not sure where that connection went, but we're all back together, it seems. Carry on, Tom.
Oh, I'm not sure what part of the story you missed. Anyways, so everyone keeps asking if she's going to have her. I forget what it's called, but when Catholics turn 14, 15, they have. It's not first communion, but
confirmation.
Confirmation.
Yes,
yeah.
confirmation.
So everyone keeps asking her if she's going to have confirmation, and she's like, I don't know. That's my mom's business. Being that half of my family is Jewish, we've been to all my nieces' bat mitzvahs. So my daughter, she expressed an interest in having a bat mitzvah.
Yes.
Because I've always told her, if I were ever religious, I'd be Jewish, because that's the religion that kind of speaks to me. If I were religious, but and a lot of Jews are very secular. There's a lot of atheist Jews.
Yes.
Because it's a very cultural thing. So my daughter expressed an interest in a bat mitzvah, and I went through and I told her everything that was involved in having a bat mitzvah, and she's like, it's too much work. But,
too much work, not too expensive.
Yeah. Yeah, it's expensive, but just there's a lot of studying, and you got to get in front of the synagogue and do a speech, and there's a lot of. So I told her that was one of my regrets, that my family never really did that. My cousins did, but I didn't. My family never pushed religion. So I grew up having Christmas and going to church, and when I got over the idea of Santa Claus, I got over the idea of God. But we still had Christmas in church and Hanukkah. So it was, to me, they were cultural things. So I was actually really shocked when I found out that because my entire family, I'm the only atheist. They all believe in God. They all think God is real. And I'm like, how did I?
How did you miss it? Yeah. So do they continue to practice, or are they because you gave me the impression that when you were young, they weren't that fervent. Maybe they attended occasionally.
They're not fervent at all. They're Well, I have one sister who's Jewish, and one who's super duper Christian. My mother, I used to tease her. She was almost born again. She was in the birth canal.
Almost born again. I love that.
And then the other two are they're very religious, but they're not they don't broadcast it like the one sister. I mean, the one sister, she's like God, 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 but even she thinks my ex-wife is overboard. I've only had one real disagreement with a sibling who asked me, don't you think you should believe in God just in case? And I gave her the old, in case what? In case God's an idiot and doesn't recognize the fact that I'm faking it. Which she was not happy with that answer.
John, can I plug two resources here that might be of use to parents atheist parents of
Yeah, go ahead,
children.
sure.
So the first one is a book by the School of Life. It's called Big Ideas for Curious Minds. It's basically a simplified or philosophy aimed at tweens. Let's put it like that. It's a brilliant resource. And then I don't know if you're familiar with the book. I've never done it with my kids. Because they're too old now. But I do wish that I had access to it when they were 9, 10, 11 years old. And it's called, I just had it on my Kindle now, and I don't know, where is it gone now? It's
Well,
the Belief Book. The Belief Book by um I'm not wearing my glasses, so by David G. McAfee and Chuck Harrison. And it's a wonderful resource that parents can use to teach their kids. I don't want to say expose their kids, because that expose is such a expose type of word, but it's such a nice book that gives in language that young kids can understand the background of religions. So the Belief Book by David McAfee, that's wonderful. And then I want to ask you something else, Tom. So I'm very interested about you being a father and raising a daughter, because my own children are still well, I'm still raising kids, and I'm also a teacher. So something that I find sometimes troubling is religion. Though I'm very much not, I'm anti-religion. I can see some of the benefits when raising children, in the sense that you do give them something, but I find that if you just take the ritual and the rhythm away, it can happen that they sort of feel, so what do I do now? Especially in a culture that is very religious and places very strong emphasis on religious practices, and I would like to see that philosophy takes the place of religion, what religion gives children, because I can see that religion and practicing a religion and going to church regularly, it does give a sense of stability that I had in my life. And I sometimes think maybe I made a mistake in just pulling that rug out of my children's lives, and not replacing it with some definite ritual or routine. And I think that something like philosophy and teaching them about philosophy would be a sensible way, because it teaches them to think, but you still give them sort of that, I don't know what to call it, a grounding. What's your opinion about that?
I understand where you're going with that. Unfortunately, most religion doesn't do that.
I agree. That's why the lesser of two evils is just having no religion.
My daughter's mother is a perfect example of, she takes her to church 3 or 4 times a week, but my daughter has zero religion, she has zero interest, she has zero belief, and yet she's had all this exposure. My best friend, who's also Catholic, he's got 3 kids, and he said, gotta go to church, gotta go to church, gotta go to church. So he was very, very involved in the church. And hopefully he's not watching this, but when his daughter was like 15 or something, she goes, "Oh, John, I'm an atheist. Aren't you proud of me?" And I was like, I know I shouldn't be, but I kind of am. Because his kids were overexposed to religion, but it was their father's religion. It was his thing. So they were made to go to church, but they weren't. They were basically told, you have to believe until his one son he basically kicked out his son. I mean, he was like 22 at the time, but he said, if you don't go to church with me, you can't live in the house anymore. And I thought
horrible.
Horrible.
That is not Christian. That is truly horrible.
Yeah.
But you could get this sort of social aspect by joining pretty much any club. I mean, you go and join a golf club or a choir or something.
I've often thought of starting a church and just making it all about community service. Because
Yes.
that's what churches they always profess that. They're like, oh, we do help for we take in $1 million and we give $10,000 to the poor. And that's what Donald Trump does. You look at all these Catholic churches. Catholic churches have to pay 10% of all the money they come in to the Pope, to the Vatican. I think it might even be more than 10%, but they have to pay the Vatican. Doesn't matter how much they bring in, they have to pay the Vatican. The Vatican, which is the richest country in the world, it's a gold-plated country, and yet every Catholic church in the world has to send them money. That's a sickness. And all the money that the churches take in and say, oh, we do good deeds, we do good deeds. You know how much money is spent? Billions of dollars of money is spent on defending Catholic priests and hiding them and moving them and paying off the families of the children that were abused by them.
Yeah.
So all this money that's paid to the Catholic Church from tithings is going to pay for child rapists. And I point that out to them, and they're like, oh, no, they do other good stuff too. I'm like, listen to yourself. My ex, I will point that out to her, and her response was, other people rape kids too. I was like, what? Like these are men of God. These are God's people.
Yeah. They're supposed to be setting an example.
Kids too.
So I wonder if you base your judgment on the fact that priestophile rapists, I like to put those two words together, pedophile priests and call them priestophiles, if they commit a rape and to set against it they do good stuff, what's the exchange rate? I mean, how much good stuff counteracts one rape?
All they have to do is go to confession, and God says, all your sins are wiped clean.
Well, I want to take that even one step further, John, because many people say that, yes, religion does some harm, but overall it does more good.
Which is a lie. Outright.
Which I think is a lie. But in any case, how are you going to do that calculation? Because if everything could be worked out like that, then why go with what is true and what is false? I mean, then you can say, well, to deceive people is possibly better for them in the short run, and in the long run they're going to die, so I'll just deceive them. That's basically what you're doing, because religion absolutely negates the fact that truth matters and that there is something like this is true and this is false. And so I'm taking your pedophile priests one, but I'm zooming out, and I'm saying the same can be said of religion. And I want to come back to raising children. I think it's important that children should know this and should know that truth matters. And I like to give this example. So my kids are smart, and I think they're the most beautiful things God created, the God that I don't believe in. And I think they're capable of almost anything they want to be capable, they want to do. But when my daughter was in junior high, she went to trials for the first hockey team. But so she never played hockey. She started playing hockey in that year, and she was a new kid in school, new town, and she said, I want to try out for the first hockey team. And I said, go for it, my girl, try out. And she said, what do you think my chances are? And I said to her, and some people said, how could you say that? I said, I don't think your chances are very good. Number one, you're the new kid in school. You haven't played hockey for 3 months yet. I think you're good. I think you have the potential. But I think that there are other kids who the coach has known since they were in grade 1. So I don't think your chances are very good, but that doesn't mean that I'm not supporting you and that you shouldn't go. And I think that principle of teaching one's children about realism, uh, yes, try out, but don't tell them, yes, you have a good chance, when you know that realistically, even if they're the best, they still might not have a good chance, because the chairperson of the board's daughter is trying out and she has a better chance just because her dad's the chairperson. So even if she's a better player, I think it's important. It's more important to face uncomfortable truths than to believe comfortable lies. And that's a principle that I think kids should be taught by their parents, preferably, because we can do it in a way that sort of, life is hard. What do you say to that, Tom? And John, I mean, you have kids yourself.
I was going to mention that earlier, that that's kind of the foundation of religion, is believing a comfortable lie is easier than an uncomfortable truth. And I'm a very strong believer in my daughter knowing, and that's, we talked about death when she was very young, and I was very honest and open with her. When something dies, this is what happens, and they cease to exist. I didn't candy coat anything. I've kind of gone out of my way not to candy coat anything. I've gone out of my way to expose her, like Santa Claus. She had Santa Claus, but she never believed in Santa Claus because she knew what Santa Claus was. When she got presents from Santa Claus, she knew they were from me. But I put Santa Claus because it's fun. I had this conversation with Penn Jillette, who doesn't he doesn't want any kind of Christmas in his house. He just no exposure to it. And I was like, but Santa Claus is fun. He's like, oh, we can have fun without Santa Claus. I was like, well, that's true. But when the rest of your family believes in Santa Claus and they they all celebrate what you get from Santa Claus, it's nice that my daughter's able to say, I got this from Santa Claus, and we all know where it came from. Hold on one second.
Yeah. Well, my father told me, I mean, poor bloke, he's dead long ago, but lovely fellow he was too. But he told me how he was like the youngest member of a family. All of his brothers and sisters, and there was about 5 or 6 of them, were separated from him by several years. He was like the last person in the siblings. And they and the parents kept up the pretense that Santa Claus was a real person very late into his life. So he didn't discover that Santa Claus was a make-believe until he was, I don't know, 12 or 13 or something.
Shame.
And when he was told that they'd been tricking him all this time, he felt devastated because he didn't know who he could trust.
Yeah. And that's
so I think that shielding somebody from the truth is almost as bad as deliberately deceiving them.
And it is deliberately deceiving them. They think it's fun, and the idea of Santa Claus is fun, but when you perpetrate a lie, it's not fun. It's a lie.
Tom, I want to ask you, what is your training, your profession? And you'll see why I want to get to this.
Well, I was a structural and graphic designer for many years. I was a substitute school teacher for about a year and a half.
Oh, fantastic. Teachers are awesome people, don't you think, John?
Well, teachers are. Students, not so much. And parents of students, even worse.
Okay, but what I want to say is this idea of the truth and shielding people from the truth and believing comfortable falsehoods. I think it's harmful in many ways, because shielding somebody from the truth is not the same as inculcating an imagination. And I think imagination is extremely important.
Yes.
As an educator, I think many scientists wouldn't have been good scientists if they didn't have the imagination.
Yeah.
But what people often don't see is that imagination requires, in certain circumstances, the term, I'm a literature, that was my, that's my postgrad is in English literature. And we learned about the suspension of disbelief. And that's what happens when you see a play performed. There's a suspension of disbelief. The audience knows, the actors know, and that's what causes the fun. Nobody who sees a movie believes that Iron Man is real, and that's where the fun is. And I think that what your poor father experienced was deception, which is not the same as a suspension of disbelief. And when you teach your kids, so I mean, my kids, we don't have a tooth fairy in South Africa. We have a mouse who takes the teeth, and he leaves a coin in the shoe. And one of my boys swallowed his tooth by accident. So he sculpted a little tooth out of cheese, and he wrote a letter. And I've kept the little letter that he wrote to the tooth mouse. And I'm sure he knew that it was his dad and I who put the money in the shoe. But that's part of the fun, and that's a suspension of disbelief. And that's something completely different to deception. And faith and the religion, in a way, prevents that fun of a suspension of disbelief, you know?
Well, I think the tooth mouse would have been better pleased with a cheese tooth than a real one.
Well, that's what we reckoned. So what do you think about this idea that raising children with an imagination and the idea of a suspension of disbelief is much better but an appreciation of truth and of even harsh facts, that things die and they go away forever when they die. You can never get that hamster or that kitten. It's gone. And the same can happen to people. And friends move away, and friends can. I mean, a friend of my son's passed away. He had so things like that happen. But to try and protect them from the reality of life is worse than just teaching them how to cope, but also teaching them that there is such a thing as a suspension of disbelief, and we can have fun doing that.
I tell this to Christians and other religious people all the time. The idea of heaven is a very nice idea. It's nice to believe that your family's up in a perfect place. It's nice to believe that, but to actually believe that, it's kind of creepy. The idea, it's like your family's up there by themselves, and they're waiting for you to die to join them, but then your family's going to wait for you to. I mean, it's just, and forever and ever. It's like, did you always get along with your mother? Did you always call her as much? Are you ready to spend eternity with her saying, "I wish when you were alive you had called me more"? I mean, it just when you really think of heaven, it's crazy. I mean, it's good to have these not beliefs, but it's good to imagine these things because they're comforting. I understand that fully, but to actually believe them, it seems very damaging because it's a disconnect from reality, and it's living a fantasy. So I mean, my daughter, she has, I think, a very healthy concept of death, and she knows when I die. I've said, take me to the hospital, say donate whatever organs they can use, tell them to take it, but I want my skeleton to be preserved and donated to the university, because I like the idea of my skeleton, because I don't know if you've noticed, I have a blue tooth. I
saw that
an implant, and it's a tooth implant. It's very expensive, and I have no tattoos or any piercings or anything that but I decided that if I'm going to spend all this money for a tooth, I want something to show for it. So I had to make it blue. And plus, I'm a tech guy, so Bluetooth just sounded fun.
I love that. I just love that.
I like the idea of my skeleton being in some university with the Bluetooth.
And if you think about it, that's a much more guaranteed afterlife. To stand in some doctor's office as a skeleton, I mean, at least you know that you're going to have an afterlife.
Yeah.
Like that.
But my dad, I believe my dad is very comfortable with the concept of death, and she understands the concept of hell. She understands the concept of heaven, and she understands all these concepts because I want her to know them because some of them are fun, some of them are interesting, but I want her to have a real sense of realism of what's real and what's made up.
So Tom, I don't want to pry too much into your private life, but to what extent was religion the direct cause of your marriage failing?
It was troubled fairly early on. Once she became more religious, once the religion kind of was starting to interfere with the marriage, I started doing, I was getting on YouTube and I was making comments, and somebody encouraged me to post my own videos. So I started my YouTube channel based on, what was going on in politics. But a lot of it, I think, was a response to my marriage, the religion just creeping in and interfering.
It was a threesome.
Yeah. And finally, she had miscarriage and her father committed suicide, and she kind of lost her mind. And I encouraged her to go to church. I went to church with her. We went to church for a couple of years. I went with her to Catholic church, even though it was a Spanish church. But we were friends with the priest, and they all knew I was an atheist. So I was very welcomed in the church. But she just got more and more, and the priest of the church got sent to this other church, big fancy church. So she started going to that one, but it was far away. I'm like, I'm not driving all the way to go to that church because the other one was real close. So she started driving to this other church, and she got involved in a youth group, and they sucked her in, and she just got more and more, started going all the time. And they're like, oh, they want me to go to a church retreat. I'm like, whatever. She came back from that church retreat, and she talked to me for about an hour about how God had touched her, how God had held her hand, how God had given her a hug, that she could no longer be with me. And that was it.
Guys, we were talking a minute ago about being deceived, and I'd like to play this little clip of Crichton from Red Dwarf, who was, just see his reaction to when he discovered that he'd been tricked.
The end for me, sir. It's just the beginning. I have served my human masters, and now I can look forward to my reward in Silicon Heaven. Silicon what? Surely you've heard of Silicon Heaven. Has it got anything to do with being stuck opposite Bridget Nielsen in a packed lift? It's the electronic afterlife. It's the gathering place for the souls of all electrical equipment. Robots, calculators, toasters, hairdryers. It's our final resting place. I don't mean to say anything out of place here, Craig. That is completely wacko jacko. There is no such thing as Silicon Heaven. Then where do all the calculators go? They don't go anywhere. They just stay. But surely you believe that God is in all things. Aren't you a pantheist? Yeah, but I just don't think it applies to kitchen utensils. I'm not a frying pan theist. Machines do not have souls. Computers and calculators don't have an afterlife. You don't get hairdryers with tiny little wings sitting on clouds playing harps. But of course you do. For is it not written in the electronic Bible, the iron shall lie down with the lamb? Common sense, sir. If there weren't a better life to look forward to, why on earth would machines spend the whole of their lives servicing humankind? Now that would be really dumb. Yeah, makes sense. Silicon Heaven. Don't be sad, Mr. David, sir. I am going to a far, far better place. Just out of interest, is Silicon Heaven the same place as human heaven? Human heaven? Goodness me. Humans don't go to heaven. No. Someone just made that up to prevent you from all going nuts.
Yep. Although I have to say, I must be really strange because the idea of heaven doesn't seem appealing to me at all. In fact, the idea of living forever, I think that's the most frightening idea that anybody ever came up with. I don't want to go much beyond 70, in fact, because I mean, I don't want to be old and grey and wrinkly and full of aches and pains. I want to die before I'm 65. Really. Who wants to live forever? I know it's the title of a song as well. I know, but I really, honestly, the idea of heaven as something to look forward to. I mean, how on earth is that something to look forward to? And especially the type of heaven that I was indoctrinated with, where all you do all day long, 24/7, is sing songs of praise to God. I
Yeah.
mean, how boring is that? Would I be allowed to crochet? I mean, if they have crochet hooks and wool and new patterns, then I could go to heaven. But if I can sing praises while I'm crocheting, hallelujah, I mean that would be fine. But just to sing praises.
I tell this to people. I said, imagine everything you find interesting in life, everything that's fascinating, everything that gets your interest. Do you think any of that's going to be in heaven? There's going to be no alcohol or drugs or smoking or sex or
Crochet.
pornography
unless you're a Muslim and a bloke, then you do get all of that stuff in their heaven.
So it's just
Muslim heaven is better than the Christian one.
For men, yeah.
Oh, okay.
Well,
always.
Islam. How do they indoctrinate young men to do the bidding, of Allah to kill other people? They promise them 72 virgins, which personally, I'd rather one good whore than 72 virgins. But they promise them something that's kind of crazy.
Yeah, experience counts, doesn't it? Yeah.
I mean, there's kind of a joke, when Osama bin Laden gets to heaven, George Washington and Thomas Jefferson are there and they're hitting him, and then Ben Franklin and all, John Adams and all these guys are starting hitting him. Goes, what the? Where are my 72 virgins? I'm like, virgins? No, it was Virginians.
Tom, would you like to plug your channel? Do you still make videos? Do you still have a YouTube channel going?
My YouTube channel's still up, and that's search for Tom the Friendly Neighborhood Atheist. But I started, and it's down there. It's TikTok. I'm starting to do videos because I've kind of changed gears. I was very involved in the atheist movement, but things changed in social media and the whole YouTube movement and safe spaces and social justice warriors kind of took a lot out. And right now, with Black Lives Matter, I've been very interested, is not the right way of saying it, but this whole thing with Fox News and all these conservative things are acting like white people are under attack, white people are the victims, white people are being persecuted, which is sickening to me. So I started a new TikTok channel, and it's Tom _ YFN Friendly Neighborhood _ atheist, and I'm going to be talking about white privilege. I'm going to be talking about basically what white privilege is, and white privilege isn't. People get very angry when they hear that term, but all it is basically the advantage of white people have that non-white people don't have. And a lot of people get upset with the term white privilege, and I want to attempt to kind of take I don't want to say the stigma out of it, but white people have privilege, and we didn't ask for it. We didn't, demand it. We didn't do anything. We just simply, society gave it to us because we're white, because society has been built on white culture. And, non-whites have gotten the short shrift because white people had the power. And now white people are say, "Oh no, we're the victims. We've done everything good and everything's equal now."
It's not
apprehension that you can't have like an advantage for 400 years and then say, "Okay, and today everything's equal."
Speaking of which, next week we have a black guest in the shape of Bryce Cornell, who's somewhere in, I think, the southern east coastern states, where the makeup of the demographic is different from. Well, maybe Chicago's changing. It's a long time since I was there, but you tell me it's becoming more Muslim. So the whole thing is changing rapidly and increasingly fast. It's an exponential curve, isn't it? We have to run to keep up, just standing still. So I suspect that these black people who say to you, and I don't like using the terms white and black myself, because I don't think it matters. I think these superficialities are not how you should judge people. You should judge them by their actions. You don't judge a book by its cover, and it's the same for skin. But these people who accept the description of being black, they would say to you that 300 years ago, you white people did insist on privilege. You came with your bigger guns and took control of us. And so that's what we're up against, our ancestors. We're not responsible for them, but somehow people want us to accept their guilt. On that note.
But we all have to live with the consequences of what our ancestors did. You know, the Bible says it. Yes. Until the third and the fourth generation.
Yes.
We have to live with the consequences of our ancestors. And as a white South African, I can say that, and we do live with it. And it's not nice if the wheel has turned, then it's not nice to live with the consequences of your privileged ancestors.
Yeah,
it's nice. Ask me. I know.
I want to add one thing to that subject. Because my family's half my family's Jewish. My father actually was in a concentration camp. Well, actually, it wasn't quite the concentration camps as they became. It was earlier on, and it was basically a retention camp with his family. But I had a lot of relatives that were killed by the Nazis in World War II. Yeah. And I make the comparison. I think I have a different view on Black Lives Matter, because Jews in World War II were, in a very short period of time, treated like dogs, treated like just unhuman and like garbage and eviscerated. Black Lives Matter is based on the 400 years that Black people were treated exactly the same way. If you take the 400 years of Black lives of slavery and condense it into 20 years, that's kind of what happened to Jews in Europe. So I have a viewpoint of my family was treated as unhuman. They were dogs.
Yeah.
And, I get how that can inflict on your psyche.
Yeah.
I'm a generation removed, and I'm still affected by it.
And it was God who introduced the myth that one person can take on the blame for all the population. Yes. That was a ludicrous idea. Yeah. So, guys, thank you very much. It's been fascinating chatting to you. I'm going to call the program to a close now, in the time-honored tradition of making an hour last an hour.
Tom, don't go away. I want to talk to you.
Okay, I'm here.
Okay, so thank you for watching, viewers, and thank you, future viewers, and thank you for your comments. And we'll continue to discuss this in the details underneath if you like. Say bye-bye.
See you later.
Bye.